Before we get into it, I'd just like to lay down some criteria. We're not just going to include stadiums that are situated in a scenic spot. They actually have to have mostly unobstructed views of the scenery. Also, we're only including proper stadiums with at least a few thousand seats, rather than a field that might have a few seats here and there. So here are 20 stadiums with a spectacular view. Oracle Park. It's one you probably expected. It's a stadium that's basically cut off by the water. Well, it was there first, but they've designed it that way. So most seats have an enviable view across the San Francisco Bay, where fans often wait on a kayak for the rare splash hit to arrive. Newlands Cricket Ground. Ironically, Newlands is the oldest stadium you'll see in this video. It's one of my favourite cricket grounds in the world. The view of Table Mountain is simply awe-inspiring, and the stadium doesn't get in the way of it at all. Thankfully, they've kept the seating quite minimal on the west side. Folsom Field. This is one where the stadium is just as good looking as the scenery itself. It's situated in a place called Boulder, Colorado, so you'd expect to see some rocks, and you do, up there. Okay, they're not quite boulders, but rocky mountains instead. Once again, they've wisely designed the stadium in a way that doesn't interfere with that view. Hibernian Stadium. This is by far the most rudimentary stadium you'll see in this video, but that's completely irrelevant because it's all about the view. It's elevated above the Palatorio Wharf, which gives you a view of the giant cranes, the ships, the water, and of course the city of Paolo itself. Central Coast Stadium. The ground that could have been home to Usain Bolt the football player has a bit of a Caribbean feel to it. Although the stadium is separated from the water by a road, some palm trees and some giant inflatable bottles of sauce on match day, it still makes for a very relaxing environment. That water, by the way, is an estuary, not the ocean proper. Lindquist Field. Okay, basically every stadium in Utah has a great view. And this one has a very similar view to many other stadiums in the States, but the sheer rock face here seems to be the most dramatic vista of them all. And obviously a minor league baseball stadium isn't really going to obstruct the view. What the hey, let's include one more from Utah. Lavelle Edwards Stadium probably has a slightly better view than the other football stadiums in the States. And that's especially painful for the Utes fans, because I believe BYU recently broke a winning streak that the Utes had over the Cougars. Anyway, the view doesn't get too much better than this in terms of college football. HPCA Stadium. If the Wasatch Range isn't enough, then how about the Himalayas? This colourful stadium is situated in the city that gave sanctuary to the Dalai Lama, Dharamshala. And what's good for a monastery is good for a cricket stadium, as the old Tibetan saying goes. The view of the mountains is one thing, but the architecture of the stadium itself, that somewhat resembles the local architecture, is equally attractive. Estadio BBVA. It's perhaps my favourite stadium in Mexico. The design is quite distinctive in that the structure is lopsided and the roof is slanted, in order to offer the spectators sitting high up in the north end a view of the Cerro de la Silla, a rather beautiful mountain. I wonder if those seats are more expensive. That's certainly where I'd sit. PNC Park. Yet another baseball stadium, but they do have a bit of an advantage given that the outfield seating isn't really necessary. There's a lot going on here. Several of those bright yellow bridges crossing the Allegheny River that Pittsburgh is famous for, and of course the Pittsburgh skyline itself. It's definitely postcard worthy if they still exist. Mikuni World Stadium, Kitakyushu. When you're just 2 meters or 6 feet from the ocean, you better have a view of the water. What a travesty it would have been if they built the same stand on all 4 sides, blocking the view. Yes, it's not quite as tranquil as the palm trees and sauce bottles of Central Coast Stadium, but I actually don't mind a bit of an industrial view. Rheinpark Stadion. Liechtenstein is more than just a powerhouse of the false teeth manufacturing industry. It is, after all, just a stone's throw from Switzerland, or a stone skim I should say, it's just across that river. So it has some very Swiss scenery as you might expect. And the small stands of Rheinpark Stadion certainly don't block the view of these towering mountains. Estadio Virgen de las Nieves. You may have heard the name La Palma in the news. A volcano erupted on the island, but thankfully this stadium is well and truly out of the... Oh. Gulp? Give me a minute, I'm slightly worried. Oh, phew. Thankfully it was actually this one over here that erupted. Not just for the stadium's sake, but the locals more importantly. There has thankfully been no fatalities. Sitting in the precarious position on the side of a volcano on an island does have its perks. The main one being the awe-inspiring view across the wide expanse of the North Atlantic Ocean. Riverside Ground. Now this one's a little less obvious. You might be thinking that the view is of a river because of the name, but that's not it. Can you see what's so special about the view? No, you can't because it's not in this shot. But the stadium is overlooked by a Lumley Castle that peeks its way over the trees. That's a quintessentially English sight if ever I've seen one. Marina Bay Floating Stadium. I know on the surface it looks like your bog standard stadium, but if you take a closer look, you'll see that the field is actually floating on the water of Marina Bay, as the name suggests. For a long time I assumed that they had created a man-made island for the field, but no, it is actually floating. You also get a great view of some fairly spectacular buildings that Singapore is known for. Changlimithang Stadium. Ain't nothing but a Changlimithang, baby. Although it's probably pronounced Changlimithang, as you might remember from your Dzongkar language class at school. The scenery doesn't quite have the grandeur of some that we've seen so far, but much like HPCA Stadium, the architecture of the stadium itself really adds to the view. Nieves Park? This one's a little different to any we've seen so far. Yes, it's right by the sea, but you also get a pretty interesting view of the adjacent amusement park. This is Coney Island, by the way. It's a pretty cool spot, but there is one downside, and that's when a strong wind is blowing from the right direction. Yeah. And while we're in the New York area, what's better than a view of some water and a theme park? How about some water and the distant Manhattan skyline? Yep, I think Richmond County Bank Ballpark tops the last one. You also can catch a glimpse of some ferries that dock nearby. I'd imagine the night game here would be absolutely incredible. Estadio Regional di Cinque. I didn't forget about you, South America. Much like Estadio BBVA, the stadium was designed to allow for some views of the scenery. But this one had to drop especially low so spectators could see the water as well. It's located in southern Chile, so it has that sort of dramatic landscape that's been carved away by glaciers. Probably. I think I'm right on that. Stadio Giuseppe Sinigaglia. Man, there's something about the Italian words. I can't help myself. You may have heard of Lake Como. It's a fairly sought after spot for celebrities to buy a home. And for good reason. It's absolutely beautiful here. If the lake itself isn't majestic enough, then the steep hills that surround it are. The design doesn't exactly make the most of it, but it still undoubtedly deserves its place in this video. And those were 20 stadiums with a spectacular view. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.